Hi guys, I'm just another guy named James, and today I'm going to be talking about G.I. Joe once again. But this time I'm actually doing a little bit of a throwback and a remake. And today I'm going to be talking about the first 10 issues of G.I. Joe. And the reason I'm doing this is because I made this video. I made the original version of this video talking about these 10 issues of G.I. Joe a long time ago, if I'm being honest, and I recently looked back on some of them, and they didn't seem very quality. Like there's a lot of stuff that I do currently that I wasn't doing at the time I made those for these videos that I think would help a lot, and I want to be able to have like a higher quality version of that video to call back to. But yeah, but I'm actually really excited because it was really fun getting to read these 10 issues of this comic again. Now, it's 10 issues. It might end up being a bit of a longer video. Obviously, I'm recording this intro first things first. But yeah, this is a really fun era of the G.I. Joe comic. In a lot of ways, the comic's still trying to find its identity at this point, at this early point in its from its inception, but it's really cool. Yeah, a lot of the one of the really nice things about this era is a lot of the concepts and characters are given a little more room to breathe than they are later in the comic, or yeah, later on in the publication run of G.I. Joe. And yeah, it's just a really good kickoff to the comic. So we'll talk art and story first. So most of these 10 issues are written by Larry Hama, just like almost every other issue of the G.I. Joe comic. Notably, there is one, this issue number 8, that is written by the artist for this era of G.I. Joe, Herb Trimpe. Herb Trimpe, though, notably did not draw G.I. Joe issue 2, that one being drawn by Don Perlin. And then these two issues 9 and 10, were drawn by Mike Vosburgh and somebody else. Hold, please. Mike Vosburgh and... let's see. Oh, but they're both drawn by Mike Vosburgh. The art in at this era of the series is pretty good. And honestly, this is going to be a bit of a longer video also because we have 10 issues here and we have 9 stories. Almost every single one of these issues is a standalone, read it by itself story, which I think is really nice, and I think the comic flows in a really good way from here. Obviously it's a toy tie-in comic, being G.I. Joe, but there's so many concepts beyond the toy line that in a lot of ways the creativity really does feel like it's being fired on all cylinders for this era of the comic. There's so many additional characters and concepts, and it's just a really interesting and fun era of the G.I. Joe comic. And it kicks off really well. But before we actually hop in, we'll just kind of briefly, very, very briefly, like we won't introduce the concepts. Never mind. The first issue does all that for us. I forgot about that. But yeah, overall, I think I'm just ready to hop straight into the comics, which today open with a brief introduction to the G.I. Joe team, introducing it as a rapid deployment counter-terrorism strike force. And after that brief conceptual introduction, We cut away to a train where a political activist named Dr. Burkhart, who had been coerced into creating a doomsday weapon for the U.S. government, is being transported to Washington, D.C. to testify before a congressional committee. A group of terrorists then attacks the train and they kidnap Dr. Burkhart. And we then cut away to the Pentagon, where we see Generals Flagg and Austin have discovered that Burkhart was kidnapped by Cobra, and they decide to call in the G.I. Joe team. We then cut away to Fort Wadsworth, just a military base in New York, where we see Colonel Hawk and Clutch, two of the G.I. Joes, are driving into Joe headquarters in the chaplain's motor pool. Hawk then goes down into the pit where he calls the Joe team together for a special briefing. In the briefing, Hawk explains that Cobra has taken Dr. Burkhart to an island in the Caribbean and are holding her in an old Spanish fort, which is guarded by a full garrison of 1,200 troops. Hawk then explains everyone's role in the mission, giving Grunt, Short Fuse, and Stalker, having them go to the airfield on the island and destroying everything, leaving only one small plane for removal from the island. Flash and Breaker are then given the task of taking down the radar nest, and Scarlet and Snake Eyes are taking down the power generators in the fort and clearing the way for the main strike team to storm the fort. Hawk also briefs the team about Cobra Commander and the Baroness, the leaders of Cobra, and he reminds them that their goal is primarily rescuing Dr. Burkhart, not taking down Cobra. We then get cut to the island, where we see that Cobra Commander seems to view Burkhart's capture more as a means to an end than anything else. Do we know what that end is? No. Then one of the Cobra troopers alerts the commander that a small strike force has been deployed to the coast of the island. So Cobra Commander sends some of his armor out to intercept the boat. But the Joes are cruising their way to the island and they're spotted, so Stalker throws on a jetpack and flies behind the enemy lines and starts bombing them. The rest of the team makes it to the beach and they split off to their individual missions. First, we see Flash and Breaker make their way to the radar nest and they sabotage it so that the radar is sending a perpetual all-clear signal back to the Cobras. We then see Stalker, Grunt, and Short Fuse are attacking the airfield and clearing it out, which serves as the signal for the main assault team, and the rest of the Joe team storms the beaches. With the Vamp, that green Jeep, the Ram, the motorcycle, and the Mobat tank are all pushing towards the fort. Inside that very same fort, we see Scarlet and Snake Eyes destroy the generators for the base, which causes Cobra Commander to start his final plan, which involves shipping off Dr. Burkhart. The Joes keep pushing into the fort, but along the way, the initial island strike force sees the car with Burkhart being transported in it, and Stalker goes in for the rescue. But when he picks up Dr. Burkhart, it's really the Baroness in disguise. Back in the fort, Cobra Commander plans to escape with Burkhart and kill the Joes, using a series of explosives to destroy the fort after he escapes. Snake Eyes and Scarlet then run in, and after Burkhart explains Cobra Commander's plan, she's shot in the arm. Scarlet then disarms Cobra Commander with a throwing star, but at the same time, the rest of the team busts in. But as they secure Dr. Burkhart, Cobra Commander and the Baroness slip away. But since the fort's about to explode, the Joes just hop in Cobra Commander's helicopter, and leaving Baroness and the Cobra Commander to escape in the plane on the airfield. A few weeks later, in the North Pole, we see that a U.S. research station has been attacked, so Generals Flagg and Austin, fearing Russian involvement, decide to deploy a G.I. Joe strike team consisting of Stalker, Breaker, Scarlet, and Snake Eyes. As the team flies to the Arctic, they are given their mission orders, which are to figure out what happened to the station, But they're in a strictly observatory role, and they're not to engage with the Russians. With the secondary mission being to recover the missing data from the U.S. research station. After the Joes drop out of the plane, they set up a hunting blind and they begin to observe the Russians. And after a few hours of literally nothing happening, an Eskimo on a dog sled comes up to the Russian station, goes in, and leaves just as suddenly as he came. But he leaves the door open, which strikes the Joes as odd because you really don't want that cold Arctic air getting into your house. And so the Joes decide to go in. And inside they find a whole lot of dead Russians, as well as a device capable of transmitting ultra-low frequency beams which affect the human mind. But part of the machine is missing. Snake Eyes then sees a bomb hidden under one of the tables, so the team runs out of the station before it explodes. As the team strikes off in pursuit of the Eskimo, who they assume stole the missing piece of the device, and the American research, they send some pictures of the Eskimo back to the U.S. so they can get some intel. The intel reveals the Eskimo's name is Quinn, and that he is a highly trained spy and an expert at fulfilling his contracts to the letter. So the Joes start running after him to stop him from giving the device and the American research to the Soviets. After about 5 hours of running, the Joes cross over a ridge where they find Quinn has camped out for the night. But when they go to confront him, they find only a dummy, and Quinn gets the drop on them, making them surrender their weapons and gear, all while Quinn explains that the Russians in the research station were doing experiments on inducing fear through ultra-low frequency rays, but it affected the Russians and caused them to kill the U.S. researchers before the Russian heating unit failed, leading to their deaths as well. The Kremlin then hired Quinn to recover the hardware and steal the Americans' research. Quinn then says that he is being picked up by a submarine at the shoreline the next day, before he leaves the team in the Arctic to die. The team then goes to work and they build a sleigh out of the plane parts, and they bring some of the explosives with them, even though they don't have any detonator caps. The Joes are using their sleigh are able to get ahead of Quinn, and they set a trap using the explosives and some gunpowder from Snake Eyes' extra ammo clips that he had in his boot. And as the sled passes under the ridge, the Joes blow the detonator bearing the sled, but Quinn isn't on the sled. And once again, he bears down on the Joes before Snake Eyes gets his gun loaded, and gets the drop on Quinn. But Quinn took the firing pins out of the guns, and he put them on his necklace. Quinn then considers helping the Joes, but he won't because of his contract. But about an hour later, we see Quinn give make it to the Russian shoreline, and he gives the Russians the papers and the device before he warns the Russians that the Joes are coming after him, but that that they have no weapons, but that he left their firing pins about a mile from the Russians' position and about 4 miles from the Joes. And then he leaves the Russians on their own. But across the frozen desert, we see that Snake Eyes has found the necklace, and the Joes are just marching towards the Russians. We then enter our next scene as a group of Joes who have just defeated a Cobra cell and are confiscating a robot that was built in the area. But we see that this is all part of a sting operation by Cobra Commander. In the pit, which is the name for G.I. Joe headquarters, we see Steeler, Breaker, and Clutch are examining the robot, and they find it to be docile. Hawk then lets the team know that he and Scarlet are going to be attending an event above the pit in the chaplain's assistant motor pool. Snake Eyes, Stalker, and Flash are in the pit's armory helping clean the guns and put all the gear from the mission away, when Cobra Commander activates his plan, where he awakens the robot and locks all the doors in the pit. Steeler is able to overload the hydraulics and get himself, Clutch, and Breaker out of the commissary, and they immediately think, oh, we gotta check on this robot, which has rebuilt itself and is attacking the Joes. At the same time, Flash is trying to melt through the lock on the door to the armory and escape. Further down in the pit, Clutch lights the robot on fire, but it doesn't seem to be very effective. We then cut to Cobra Commander, who explains that once the robot has fought its way out of the Joe's headquarters, it will transmit a homing beacon so Cobra can learn the location of Joe headquarters. The Joes all the way down in the basement keep trying to stop the robot, but it isn't going very well, and it's gaining altitude all the time. And the Joes eventually grab some paint and blind the robot, and they send it falling down one of the 5-story elevator shafts, which is just enough to destroy the robot. But the head of the robot sprouts some tentacles and tries to crawl away. But Flash, Snake Eyes, and Stalker just made it out of the armory, and Flash is able to shoot the robot. And basically Cobra's plan just fails. Then, an indiscriminate amount of time later, we see the Joe's next mission, which begins with the team being briefed on a paramilitary group that is being supplied by Cobra. The Joes are being tasked to infiltrate and take down. Grunt and Hawk are going to infiltrate the base, with Snake Eyes serving as a backup man. Hawk and Grunt then arrive at the camp, and the first thing that they take note of is the ammo dump, which is very clearly apparent to them. But while they keep running drills, we focus in on Snake Eyes, who is monitoring the base, and he sees a plane capable of delivering a nuclear bomb. So Snake Eyes sneaks into the camp, and he listens to the leader of the group's plan, which is to drop a nuke on Russia and plunge everyone into World War III. Or, as a backup plan, setting off a different nuclear warhead below the very base that they're on in Montana. And at the same time, Hawk and Grunt sneak into the armory to do some investigating. But they trip the security defenses, and after a quick fight with the henchmen, Hawk and Grunt are captured. The next morning, Snake Eyes rescues Grunt and Hawk steals a small little jet fighter to go and shoot down the bomber that had taken off to nuke Russia. The leader of the paramilitary then activates the nuke beneath the base before his wife shoots him and takes the Joes to the second nuke. And Grunt and Zap, as the rest of the G.I. Joe team had been called in and were on site, so Grunt and Zap work together to disarm the bomb. We then have another cut to another story where Steeler, Clutch, and Breaker are cleaning the Mobat tank for a parade. We also learn that the Mobat is a highly advanced tank, capable of submerging underwater for an hour. It's got a real nice microphone system. It's just got some top tier stuff. It's not just a normal everyday tank. But for that very reason, General Flagg has requested that the Mobat be in the parade to prove its ability to be camouflaged as just a generic tank. However, the orders Flagg sent to General Austin regarding the Mobat's presence at the parade are intercepted by Cobra. But then later at the parade, as the parade is being held, we see that the Mobat is being led by the Springfield Marching Band, and followed by a gigantic Navy float. And once the parade, there comes the point where the parade is stopped by traffic, and the marching band and the float work together to try to capture the Mobat. But Clutch just goes pedal to the metal and barrels through the parade to hide from the Cobras in the marching band. As they hide from the Cobras, because the tank has no live ammo, they can't just, you can't drive a live tank through a parade. They're kind of stuck, but Clutch, Steeler, and Breaker realize that Cobra Commander has to be in a fairly close proximity to the parade because of the type of radio being used by the Cobras. So they also know that if Cobra loses the trail on the Mobat, they'll go home and just keep in hiding. So the three of them decide they're going to set a trap and try to get Cobra Commander to fall into it. We then see that Then at the reviewing stand, we see that General Flagg is being questioned about where the tanks are, and he's kind of like, "That's a great question. I don't know." And Cobra Commander is able to find the Mobat, which is in the middle of Central Park. Cobra troops then go to the lake where the Mobat is hidden under the water, and it pops up and fires a warning shot at the Cobras before having them form up and march to rejoin the parade. Clutch then detects an electronics hub beneath the review stand using the Mobat sensors, so he approaches the stand at ramming speed and plows through it, revealing the Cobra nest. General Flagg then comes face to face with Cobra Commander, who takes a little girl hostage and shoots Flagg, grazing his temple, before he runs away. Later, in the pit, we see that Clutch and Breaker use the microphone system on the Mobat to fake the cannon firing, leading to the capture of Cobras, which is how they fired a shot without having any ammo. We then see for the next adventure the entire team returning home from a mission before General Hawk calls the team together for a briefing, explaining that a Russian experimental plane was shot down in Afghanistan and that the Joe team is being sent in to recover the plane. But there's also a Russian Spec Ops unit searching for the plane, and Cobra's looking for it too. So Stalker, Scarlet, Stealer, Flash, Clutch, and Breaker fly to Afghanistan, and as they're en route, we see that Hawk is leaking intel to Cobra for some reason. Once the Joes make it to the ground in Afghanistan, they assemble a rough terrain vehicle, or RTV, and they load up the plane on the RTV before they strike off through the desert, with Stalker and Clutch in the Vamp leading the RTV, until they come up to a ravine in the desert where they are ambushed. As the Joes are pinned down, the RTV picks up the Vamp and they attempt to cross the ravine. But the October Guard, the Russian Special Forces, also cross with them, and the firefight continues. But Scarlet's able to take down the October Guard's vehicles, and the situation eventually devolves into a fistfight, which is ended when Cobra arrives on the scene surrounding the Joes and the October Guard, and Cobra Commander plans to simply execute them after Cobra leaves. Cobra Commander then steals the RTV and drives it away, leaving a couple of Cobra troopers to execute Stromvik, Shrug, Horror Show, Diana, and Colonel Brekov. Colonel Brekov, Stalker, Scarlet, Stealer, Flash, Clutch, and Breaker. So the October Guard and the Joes. But Clutch is able to use the Vamp's remote control for the cannons to eliminate the Cobras. Stalker and Colonel Brekov then decide to work together to get the plane away from Cobra, but both teams know that they're likely to betray each other after they defeat Cobra. A few hours later, as the teams cross the Iranian border and take down a handful of Iranians, they find the Cobra base. The Joes and the October Guard then scout out the base and decide to go in as a three-pronged attack, going in from the top, the north, and the south, with Clutch waiting outside to cover the Joes' escape. Cobra then begins its defenses by electrocuting everyone on the roof. Clutch is then seemingly taken down by a Cobra trooper while speaking on the radio to Stalker. Inside, we see Stalker, Scarlet, and Flash navigate through a series of traps before they make it to the end of the gauntlet, only to find that Colonel Brekov has beaten them to the RTV before the teams are once again surrounded and ordered to be executed by Cobra Commander. But before anything happens, Clutch, in a Cobra uniform, holds Cobra Commander hostage, forcing the Cobra force to surrender, giving the Joes the opportunity to get the RTV. During this process, unfortunately, Cobra Commander is shot, and it's revealed that he is a robot, not the real Cobra Commander. Once the team makes it back into America, we see a brief epilogue where Hawk explains that the whole operation was merely a decoy to keep Cobra away from the real plane, which was being airlifted out out of Afghanistan, which is why Hawk was giving Cobra Commander info about the Joe's operation. We then see yet another plot by Cobra beginning to unfold as the Cobra submarine is observing a U.S. rocket launching site. We then see that the G.I. Joe team is being fully deployed to protect that very same launch site, as it's carrying a satellite that is necessary to locating and destroying a series of underwater missile launch sites controlled by Cobra. The next day, as the rocket is preparing to launch, we see a group of amphibious Cobra crawlers attacking the space center. The Joes are able to plug one of the crawlers before they're forced to retreat to the Mobat's position, where they're able to take down the rest. Zap and Short Fuse are also taking down Cobra vehicles with their handheld explosives launchers, a grenade launcher and a rocket launcher. The Joes are then able to use the satellite to find the Cobra silos and destroy them, along with a good majority of the Cobra armament. And that's more or less all that happens. There's a brief additional section where the Joes go to space, because why not? And it's just that one's a little goofy. We then open up our next adventure in the middle of a G.I. Joe operation, where the team learns that that Cobra is planning an assassination attempt involving a U.S. diplomat. So Clutch and Scarlet are given the assignment to get the ambassador to a peace conference with a third world country. Snake Eyes and Stalker are given the task to get more information on the assassination plot. We then cut to a beach in France where we see a group of Cobras try to go after the ambassador. Clutch and Scarlet then fight off the Cobras, leading to a chase through the hotel the team is staying in. We then see Snake Eyes and Stalker follow up a lead in London, where they're told to go to Amsterdam, but it's a trap from Cobra Commander. In France, Clutch and Scarlet are able to get in a car and drive into a jet and start flying away before the pilot pulls a gun on Scarlet, but Scarlet is able to knock out the Cobra agent, and her and Clutch have to end up crash landing the plane in the mountains. In Amsterdam, we see that Snake Eyes and Stalker are able to escape from Cobra Commander's trap, and they learn that the ambassador is the assassin, not the victim. Down at the border, we see Scarlet and Clutch are betrayed by the ambassador and tied up by Cobra, leaving the ambassador home free to assassinate the leader of the third world country. But Scarlet is able to... But after Clutch and Scarlet escape, Scarlet's able to throw on some skis and take down the ambassador. We then once again arrive on a new story in the middle of an operation, which is a largely successful assault on Cobra, but results in Scarlet, Snake Eyes, and Zap being captured by Cobra and taken to Cobra's true headquarters. Zap and Scarlet wake up in a holding cell, but Snake Eyes has been hooked into a machine, which its creator, the mysterious Dr. Venom, explains to Cobra Commander as, see the electrodes attached to Snake Eyes' head and recording his brainwave reaction to the visual image on the TV monitor. In this case, it is an apple. The computer will continue to flash thousands of images and record their corresponding brainwave signature until it has amassed a personalized vocabulary of the subject's thinking patterns, reduced to digitalized. What do we gain from this, Dr. Venom? Very soon, our image vocabulary will be complete. Then we can reverse the process. The computer will be able to read the subject's thoughts, enhance them, and project them as visuals on the TV monitor. By peering into Snake Eyes' memory, we shall be able to ascertain the exact location of G.I. Joe headquarters. I shall reserve judgment until I see results. You'd be well advised to remember that subject, Snake Eyes, is extremely dangerous in any condition. I shall be in my bunker. Inform me when you have something positive. As you wish, Commander. There. Now it is time to see what we can pick up from your memory, Mr. Snake Eyes. Think of the location of G.I. Joe headquarters. You are making a pathetic attempt to jam the computer by concentrating on trivial memories from your youth. The gas station you worked in as a teenager. Some sort of adolescent courtship ritual. You can't suppress the information for long. What's this? A military mission. Is that a Middle Eastern desert in the background? Very clever, Mr. Snake Eyes. You're dredging up all your painful memories because you think they will form a more formidable block against thinking about G.I. Joe headquarters. But it matters not to me how many times you relive the helicopter crash that disfigured you. I shall keep repeating my question, and I assure you I shall not grow tired before you do. Fascinating. Utterly fascinating. You've had an extraordinary life, Mr. Snake Eyes. Well traveled, too. Berlin, Cuba, Cyprus, Chile, Laos, Cambodia. And what's this? The first helicopter out of Saigon. The last helicopter out of Saigon. But let us return to the main issue. G.I. Joe headquarters, location, defenses, entry codes. Personal tragedy, Mr. Snake Eyes. You're groping desperately now. Soon you shall reveal what I want. Now we're getting somewhere. It is the one called Clutch. He's driving the G.I. Joe vehicle known as the Vamp. The missile launcher, and the Mobat tank. Yes, but where? This is an ordinary motor pool. You're a highly motivated and indoctrinated individual, Mr. Snake Eyes. But even you cannot conceal the truth from me forever. You hurt yourself needlessly, Mr. Snake Eyes. You must, of necessity, use a more excruciating memory each time. You wish to block out the images I wish to see. There. A fleeting glimpse of the interior of G.I. Joe headquarters, a training area. But how quickly you block the image with painful memories. Soon the pain and emotional torment will become unbearable. Then you shall have to have your release by telling me what I want to know. Yes. Now we are making real progress. Called for me, Dr. Venom? Yes, I shall require assistance for the final phases of this interrogation session. The subject is liable to become quite difficult. Back in the cell, we see that Scarlet and Zap are being given hallucinogens in their water. There's also a kid who's been locked up with them, who learned how to detoxify the water, and the three of them are able to escape, and the kid explains to the Joes that that they're trapped in Springfield, which used to be a nice, ordinary little town that has slowly been completely corrupted by Cobra. The crew then start heading to the town's arcade because they believe that's where Snake Eyes is being held. But the kids in the arcade start getting a little lethal. Meanwhile, in the basement, we see that the torture is seemingly starting to kill Snake Eyes. But as Dr. Venom runs off to check out what's going on upstairs, we see that Snake Eyes is actively and intentionally lowering his vitals, and once Dr. Venom comes back, Snake Eyes is dead. But once they release the restraints on him, he starts fighting and he knocks out Dr. Venom, before grabbing a gun and running upstairs, taking down the laser cannon in the arcade. The Joes are able to escape and fly back to New York, but their instruments are destroyed when they took over the plane, and a storm has overtaken them, which basically just means that they have no idea which Springfield they were trapped in. And for today, that is where our story ends. Like I said, probably a longer one, and it's definitely more than one story, which slightly false advertising, but that's all right. And honestly, this era of the G.I. Joe comic is really just pretty good. It's just so much fun. Yeah, these first 10 issues are just all really good. From the first issues, like tense kind of political thriller plot, to its backup story, which is a Middle Eastern conflict. Very next one, you got Soviets in the Antarctic. You got a giant killer robot. You've got this like political extremist group, like Ultimate Survivalist type crew. You've got this like goofy, highly advanced tank being driven through the parade. You've got these two issues, which you got these like crazy sci-fi contraptions like the RTV and just a lot of the stuff in the Cobra base. You got issue 8, which is just wild. You've got the Cobra crawlers, the satellite, this like small, somewhat small terrorist organization that somehow has access to like an entire network of underground missile launchers. You've got like a fake ambassador and like a cult and you got a cult indoctrinated town. It's just a really fun comic of this era, and it really, so the opening of this comic really does blend the kind of more real life military concepts with the medium of being a comic book so well. Larry Hama's writing on these issues is a lot of fun. There's a lot going on in the comic, but a lot of the characters do still come to life. General Flag, Colonel Hawk, Snake Eyes, Scarlet, Stalker, Clutch, like they all really do feel important. They feel well defined. Rock and Roll in the backup story to issue 1, which I didn't actually cover in this video. Like they do just really do a good job, like making all the characters feel like actual characters, not just placeholders. The only one as of right now that I would say really doesn't have that is Grand Slam. He actually, in the story with the October Guard, Grand Slam actually got replaced by Flash halfway through. In the first issue of the story, it was Grand Slam. Then the second issue, all of a sudden, it's Flash. No explanation. They just messed that one up. But yeah, the comic's just a really interesting blend of these like high sci-fi comic book concepts with this like special forces military group. They're fighting terrorists, but not all the time, which is also something that's nice. That's really interesting about this era of G.I. Joe. They're not just the counter Cobra special forces. They're an anti-terrorism unit. In the first issue, one of the stories they fight Cobra, and then in the other one they fight just these random Middle Eastern terrorists. In the second issue, there's no mention of Cobra. They're just fighting. They fight the Russians at a research station. The third issue, they're fighting Cobra. Fourth issue, they're fighting a Cobra-funded paramilitary group, but it's not. There's no Cobras in it. Issues 5, 6, and 7, they are fighting 5, 6, 7, 8, and then for the rest of it, they are fighting Cobra. But issues 6 and 7, you also get the addition of the October Guard, who are the Russian version of the G.I. Joes, which is again a really interesting concept. And this whole era is just a highly conceptual comic. There's all these cool, fun, intriguing ideas. You have these characters that you really do want to learn more about. And over the next few issues you do. Like you get to learn more and more about the characters. And the characters are cool, a lot of them. there are a few like kind of interesting things, like in hindsight, knowing where the comic goes in the future. They kind of set up a Clutch and Cobra Commander rivalry right here at the start between issues 5 and 7. They're kind of sort of setting that up. That I believe ultimately never goes anywhere. General Flag is an interesting character because there was never a toy of General Flag. He was just created for the comic. At the time, that was also true of the Baroness. Fun fact. But yeah, Dr. Venom and the Brainwave Scanner, that ends up being a really important concept for the comic. And again, it's one of those kind of goofy sci-fi things, but they kind of just address it with just enough of, oh yeah, this is kind of just how this works, that it fits with the comic. Like it doesn't actually feel out of place. And eventually, and the G.I. Joe comic really did do well when it had that true comic book feel to it. And it eventually lost that. I can give you issue numbers maybe, but I'm not going to. But yeah, this era of the G.I. Joe comic really does nail it. Even as it kind of has growing pains trying to find its identity with some of the odd, sometimes Colonel Hawk's characterized differently issue to issue. Sometimes he's more like stick in the mud. Sometimes he's more like willing to count the political calculus. Sometimes he's more willing to like. He's more of the troops are more important than anything else. So some of those like characterization fine tunings do happen. That issue 8, the issue with the crawlers and the space station and all that, that's a dumb comic, and it feels dumb when you're reading it. Like it's bizarre. It's the only one not written by Larry Hama in this set. It's written by the artist Herb Trimpe. And let's just say I can see why he was an artist, not a writer, because his art's pretty good, but the writing on these issues, on that issue, was just didn't do it for me personally. Let's just say, but that's really the only one that doesn't feel like just a generic, like a compelling, like military survival, like military spy thriller, like sci-fi thriller. It's a lot of fun, and it kind of, in some ways, it feels more like the cartoon, with like its high sci-fi concepts, its kind of stuff just happening. It kind of feels like a better written version of the cartoon, and that's something that the comic definitely lost over time. And it didn't help, and it helps that the cast is pretty limited to start. There's 13 Joes, there's 2 Cobras, and there's enough for Larry Hama to even add some concepts of his own, like General Flag, Dr. Venom, and the Baroness. But yeah, it's just a fun era of this comic, man. I'd definitely recommend. Just very good and very shockingly foundational. Like, a lot of the concepts that are introduced here last throughout the entirety of the run. Some of them do get abandoned, like G.I. Joe fighting bad guys that aren't Cobra. That's not one that lasts very long. But like the concept of Springfield, that's an important. This issue 10, the last one I talked about, is probably the most foundational for the next, like, I would say 40 issues. It's the most foundational. But issues 1 and 2 and most of the rest of the issues kind of introduce you to the characters and how they interact with each other. But yeah, it's just a really fun, good era of G.I. Joe. If there's one issue that I would skip out of this era, it would be issue 8. The characters feel kind of off. Everybody, all 13 Joes are in the comic, plus a Joe that doesn't exist. Don't know what the deal is with that, but yeah, like they just kind of add like a random 14th Joe in. It's weird. and I don't think they even like draw him. I think he's just like mentioned by name. It's like, okay, that's weird. Anyway, but yeah, like this is just a really fun era of GI Joe. These first 10 issues, really good, really highly recommend. They are honestly probably the most expensive issues of GI Joe, except disregarding the issue 21, the Silent Interlude. But like they are really good, and they have a bunch of like trade paperbacks of them. But yeah, overall, I just highly recommend this era, man. It's just really good. Herb Trimp's art is nice. I do like Mike Vosberg's better, I think. Yeah, well, I'll say that with confidence for now. I think overall I think the artwork just, for a while here, it just kind of gets better and better. But yeah, that's really all I've got on this first set of G.I. Joe. I think it's really good. I think it's really fun. I think it's a great introduction to the comic. It definitely leaves you wanting more. It doesn't leave you feeling burnt out in any way. The stories being single issue but still conclusive are really nice. That's really nice. Because if you, yeah, because as you go in the comic, the stories get longer and more interconnected, and they resolve less of the time, which is not terrible, but not great. But yeah, I think that probably really is all I have to say. I don't know how long this video is going to end up being, but I can feel in my bones that it's going to be a long one. So it might end up coming out late. We'll see. I don't know. But yeah, that's really all I have on this story. I've said that about 5 times now, I know. But yeah. So we'll just cut it here. I'm just another guy named James. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.